Whoo boy. James Gunn fully understands who Superman is, and he understands the weight of an allegory like Superman. And you see those allegories play out in a number of ways throughout this film. If you are hoping that this superhero movie does not have moments where they touch on political themes and social commentary, this might not be the movie for you.
Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things. Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian, and I am your host today for our episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. As you can see, Esther is not here. She had dance class, so she couldn't make it to watch Superman. So in the meantime, you all are stuck with me. But we at least wanted to get this episode out here for you guys because this is one of the biggest movies of the year. Now that we've gotten that all the way, let's jump into this review. So Superman is directed by none other than James Gunn, and I believe this is his first film directorial debut. Playing Superman, we have David Corenswet. Playing Lois Lane, we have Rachel Brosnahan. And of course, playing Lex Luthor, we have none other than Nicholas Hoult. So this is going to be our spoiler-free review of the film. In a couple of days, we'll spend some time diving into the themes and allegories in it. But for now, here are our initial thoughts. This film does an incredible job of dropping you into a story that has really sort of existed on its own prior to us as the fans arriving in it. We get a lot of lore built in over the first, I want to say 30 to 45 minutes of the film, but as James Gunn does very well, we're very much entertained throughout that entire time. I want to say for the first hour and a half, things move rather quickly. We're getting a lot of character development, we're getting a lot of lore, we're getting a lot of action. But as James Gunn does very well, he finds these either very explicit or very subtle moments where you feel the emotional pull that he's hoping for. And then there's a very specific moment in the film, and when you guys are watching, you know exactly what I'm referring to. There's a specific moment in the film where the story slows down a bit, and it's that moment you're like, he did it. James Gunn is masterful at that. We've seen it in virtually every single superhero movie that he does. We get this very high at the beginning of the film where there's a lot of action, there's a lot of fight scenes, and the cinematography is incredible. But there is a very pivotal moment in all of his stories where the emotional beats always land, and it's something that he is so incredibly good at. This film does a really good job at not just providing character development for Superman, but it also makes Clark Kent very interesting. I'm a huge Zack Snyder fan, but one of the critiques that I had was that outside of Superman, Clark Kent was rather stale. That is not something that you'll have to worry about in this movie. The second thing that I want to say that is incredibly impressive is that Lois Lane actually is given her own story, something that I felt like was lacking again in the Snyderverse. I don't want to spend too much time comparing it, but it is something that I noticed because James Gunn gives Lois Lane a lot of screen time, and it's not just in conjunction with Clark. She's not just there as a contrast to Clark, but she has her own motives, her own plot, and she's rather interesting. As we saw in some of the trailers, she kind of goes at it with Clark a little bit, and that sort of personality shines out very well. I think Rachel Brosnahan does a really good job at bringing that character to life, and I wanted just to make sure that we gave her a shout out. I don't want to get into too much of the allegory that James Gunn is going for, but what I will say is that James Gunn fully understands who Superman is, and he understands the weight of an allegory like Superman. And you see those allegories play out in a number of ways throughout this film. If you are hoping that this superhero movie does not have moments where they touch on political themes and social commentary, this might not be the movie for you. And I think it's important to note that over the last couple of days, we have seen a lot of pushback on the superhero film, primarily from conservatives because they want to sort of give it that quote unquote woke label. We've seen these talking points happen a lot, specifically in superhero movies over the last few years, mainly from conservative guys that are angry about the kinds of values that are being critiqued in these stories. What I would like to say, without going too much into it, is that it's important to note that, yes, superhero movies like Superman, like, people may have missed the point of these stories for quite some time, right? I also think it's important to note that we have also seen a cynicism grow primarily in our country, in America, over the last couple of decades or so. The anger that I think we're seeing from a lot of these conservative people is not just indicative on the stories changing, it's also indicative of like your values have gotten more sinister. And I think Superman does a really good job at pointing that out, that the cynicism that we're seeing for the other in our country right now is something that obviously Superman would not adhere to, but he's also serving as a beacon to combat against that. One of the things that I think I really love that James Gunn does is that he is using Superman as an allegory to normalize people who we would other, where he simply has a motive of wanting to do things that are good. That simplicity in that message is done so massively in this story. And I just have to commend James Gunn in recognizing that when you have this larger than life character, in the climate that we're in, knowing what the allegory is really sort of tapped into, having the bravery to sort of step into that space, I want to commend James Gunn for that. You know, when we talk about like our politics have sort of changed and gotten a lot more sinister, if you were to jump back, let's say during the George Bush administration and hear how he spoke about immigrants in comparison to Donald Trump, it would be like you were listening to a modern day Democrat. And I think that cynicism, that decline in our morality is something that James Gunn does so masterfully well in this Superman story, because you have this larger than life character that has given all of these gifts and abilities, and his only objective is to be a good human and to do good for other humans. I also want to spend some time giving some shout out to people like Nicholas Hoult, who I think actually did an incredible job. He had the Lex Luthor sort of charm, but he also tapped into ability where you could see the insecurities and the envy that he was carrying in comparison to Superman. And I think he did such an incredible job. The second person I want to give a shout out to is Eddie Ketheji. I don't know if you all remember, but this is the same actor that was in X-Men First Class, who was done dirty. Seeing him on the screen again was actually quite refreshing, and I appreciate James Gunn gave him moments, just like the other characters like Green Lantern and Hot Girl, moments to shine as well. There's a lot that we can get into, but overall, I think James Gunn has just done a really good job at understanding the moment when it comes to superhero movies, and I don't think that's something that we should take for granted personally. I remember a while back where we had a comment in one of our posts, I think it was on Threads. We had this person, they were responding to a video that we posted, and they were like, I can tell that these people are really good at reviewing film, but they don't understand how comic book stories are made for movies. And I felt like they were trying to create like a mutually exclusive environment between the two. But I feel like when you have directors like James Gunn, like Ryan Coogler, or even going back to, you know, directors like Christopher Nolan in the Dark Knight trilogy, you're kind of seeing that it is possible to do both. Even in the TV show realm, when we got the Netflix Daredevil, we were able to see that you were able to do both. So I think it's important for us to just recognize that, like, we are seeing an elevated level in quality in our superhero movies, and anything outside of that, you're going to get that pushback on. That's not what we're seeing with the superhero movie. People are responding very well to it, primarily because you can tell that James Gunn is taking this craft very seriously. It's not just about getting a bunch of action scenes, throwing it on the screen, and then just making sure people can turn their brain off. No, there's a message that he wants to convey there in addition to those other elements. There's an emotional beat there that superhero stories can do so well if the directors and showrunners take these stories seriously, and people like James Gunn does that very well. All in all, this is an incredible time. I would encourage you all to go see it. I can't wait for Esther to go see it. I think she'll have a blast with it. We'll try to get our video up for our spoiler review later this week, so be on the lookout for that. Let us know in the comments below if you have seen this movie. If you have, try to keep spoiler-free comments in our comment section. We don't want anyone to have anything spoiled, because there's a lot of things that you should probably be on the lookout for. Also, 2 notes, there are 2 post-credit scenes, so you'll want to stay for both. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. This is actually really weird, not having Esther here. It's like I'm talking to myself. I don't know how other YouTubers do this. This is weird as hell, bro.